Okay, welcome everybody to this session on gender transformative education for a climate resilient future. My name is Zonibel Woods, and I'm a senior social development specialist in the Gender Equality Division. And it is really my honor to be your moderator today. So first, a little bit about our session. We have 60 minutes, so we will, over the next 60 minutes, we will discuss the role that gender transformative education can play in achieving sustainable and climate resilient future. And there's sort of three key questions that we would like to explore. One of them is how to increase awareness about the role of women and girls in climate change education. The second one is really about the practical steps and strategies to promote gender transformative education. And we also would want to hear about some of the best practices for fostering climate resilient and low carbon future through gender transformative education. So our format is first to have a presentation followed by a panel discussion. And our first speaker is Christina Kwauk, who's the research director of Unbounded Associates. Christina is a social scientist and policy analyst with expertise in girls' education, 21st century skills and youth empowerment, sport for development, and she's working at the intersections between gender, education, and climate change. And it's been my pleasure to finally meet Christina because we have been exchanging and collaborating, I guess, over the last 3 years. And so it's nice to finally, or maybe more, it's nice to finally meet you. So over to you, Christina.
Thank you so much, Zoni. It's a pleasure to be here with you all today. I have less than 10 minutes to do some scene setting, so I'm going to really breeze through some basics around the intersections of gender education and climate change for you all. So I apologize in advance for how quick this will move. So first, to just get us all kind of oriented to the topic, why should we care about the intersections of gender education and climate change? Sorry. Let me try one more time. Next, please, slides. Sorry. Okay, there it goes. Oops, sorry. Too far, sorry. Let me go back. Okay, pardon the technical difficulties here. Okay, so I think probably most of us in the room understand that climate change, it pretty much is indiscriminate when it comes to wreaking its havoc on the planet. However, those who experience the impacts worst oftentimes are the most vulnerable and least skilled members of our society. So the impacts of climate change discriminate tremendously. Because of strict and constraining gender norms, girls and women are often excluded from important decision-making spaces where access to oftentimes life-saving information is passed along. And as a result, in many cases, women and girls have lower life expectancy in the face of natural disasters. And in some cases, research has shown can make up to 90% of those who perish in the face of weather-related disasters. And then those who survive are often at heightened risk for human trafficking, sexual assault, and so on in temporary shelters and spaces of recovery. And then when we think about the more prolonged climate change, so drought, sea level rise, other kinds of prolonged manifestations of climate change, household coping mechanisms oftentimes also put girls and young women at greater vulnerability. To just give you an example, girls and women, young women are often the first to be pulled out of school, for example, in a prolonged climate crisis. And as a result, are ushered on into their transition to adulthood a lot faster. Whether that is through forced and early child marriage or through exposure to other kinds of highly vulnerable situations that propel them into early pregnancy and so on. Other kinds of things that we've seen in the literature is an increased participation in household responsibilities that are reliant on environmental or access to environmental resources and natural resources, and so have to spend more time doing those kinds of chores, whether that's collecting water in times of drought and having to walk farther distances to collect that water, and also putting them at greater exposure to sexual assault and so on. So when we think about the discriminate impacts of climate change, we really begin to see how gender norms can really shape that acute experience that girls and women face. And when we think about this in the context of education, we see even further sort of downstream effects. So before COVID, for example, we already knew that 130 million girls of school-going age were not going to school due to things like poverty, harmful gender norms, socioeconomic situations, and so on. COVID threatened to put another 20 million girls on top of that number for not returning to school. And then if we thought those numbers were bad enough, estimates suggest that at least 12.5 million girls a year, their education will be disrupted because of climate impacts. So when we look at this in the context of education, we can begin to see that girls' education is really a collateral damage when it comes to climate change. And these gender norms on top of that really threaten to change the course of girls' futures and have very long-lasting impacts, not only on their own lives, but also the lives of their future households and so on. So all of that negativity, right? Like these are the negative impacts. But research suggests that, an investment in girls' education is a powerful investment. It's a smart investment. It has so many knock-on effects, whether that's in agriculture, economics, health and well-being, and so on. So, isn't girls' education also a really powerful thing in the context of climate change? The answer is yes. And actually, there are 3 really powerful reasons for investing in girls' education as a climate strategy. And the first one is that empowering transformative girls' education for girls and boys, I should say, helps to improve not only a sense of agency, self-efficacy, bodily autonomy, it also comes with strengthened reproductive and sexual rights and health. So when we look at this in the context of climate change, we can also begin to see girls being able to be more empowered, to be able to take decisions over their own lives, whether that means to delay when to get married, delay when to have their first child, space their children more in terms of years between births, and so on. So when it comes to how our human societies place pressures on our natural resources, girls' education is a quite powerful mechanism to help empower our social response to that. The second reason, if I can get the slides to move, is that we also know that formal education for girls is a powerful pathway to formal leadership, whether that's in corporate spaces or in their own household decision-making. The same goes for when we see the intersections between formal education for girls and climate decision-making. We know that in countries with higher representation of women in parliament and higher forms of social and political empowerment among women, that those countries are also more likely to pass treaties, environmental treaties, have larger areas of protected marine and land ecosystems. They have stricter climate policies, and in many cases, they also have lower carbon footprints in terms of their countrywide carbon emissions. So we know that fostering girls' leadership and decision-making is a critical element of investing in girls' education. And then the third reason, as if those 2 weren't enough, the third reason is that really attending to girls' opportunities in school helps to build their breadth of green skills. And this is vitally important as countries are beginning to invest in their economy or in the economic transitions to greener, more renewable economic structures and economic activities. But as I mentioned yesterday in our panel on gender or climate resilient futures, girls at the moment, girls and women are at the fringes of our present fossil fuel driven economies. And so if we are to transition to a green economy that is inclusive, socially inclusive, economically empowering, and healthy for our environment, centering girls' education as a critical pathway to that is vitally important for centering their experiences, their needs, and their opportunities to benefit the green economy in our approaches to the green transition. So I don't have a timer here, so I'm going to assume that I still have some time. I'm going to keep going. Okay, I'll wrap it up. Okay, so the question then is, we have 3 powerful reasons for investing in girls' education. Are countries actually investing in this as a strategy? I'm going to plow through this because I want to get to the last part of the presentation. And the simple answer is no. While countries, and this is tapping in a little bit into some research that we did with Education International to understand in the updated nationally determined contributions, are countries actually incorporating attention to education and especially girls' education? And as I said, the answer is a really sharp no. Oops, let me get this going. Okay. So we know that countries are not paying attention to this. Only 32% of nationally determined contributions are talking about climate change education at all. And none of them are calling for climate change education to be a compulsory strategy. But the good news is that we are getting more discussion of education in nationally determined contributions, but just not the kind of education that we really need to be focusing on. Another good thing is that there has been increased references to children and youth, to intergenerational equity, future generations. We can begin to see some positive trends in our climate policies, but they're not really, as I've mentioned before, talking about education in the ways that we really need to help spur more investments in the kind of work that we are talking about this whole forum. Again, I'm going to breeze through these so we can get to the last couple of slides here. Give me 1 second. There we go. So the key piece here is while nationally determined contributions or countries' approaches to climate mitigation and climate adaptation are making some advancements when it comes to talking about children, youth, gender as well, and girls, what we're not seeing is their contribution. Sorry, 1 second. A little bit of a lag here. One more slide, please. One more pass to this slide. Thank you. But they're not talking about girls' education as a formal climate strategy. So this is particularly alarming when we look especially at the 30 countries in the world who are expected to experience the worst impacts of climate change for girls specifically. Only 6 of those countries are actually talking about the intersections of girls and education. So we're not seeing enough of the policy attention to this at all in the climate space. Okay, so one more here. So, okay, once we are able to get attention to girls and education and climate change, what kind of education are we actually looking for? It's not just any kind of education, as we've been discussing the entire forum today, or the last couple of days, but actually one that is infused in addressing the underlying systemic issues that are putting girls and women at vulnerable in vulnerable positions. So I want to offer two slides here to just frame our thinking as we go into the panel. So this slide in particular helps us to understand sort of the continuum of our approaches to thinking about how we might be able to address gender in our education strategies. From one hand, being gender unequal, gender blind, to moving to gender sensitive and gender responsive education, to finally thinking about how we can promote gender transformative education. And the last slide here is to show how we might translate this into climate education as well. So on the one side of the spectrum, education as we know it, which in many cases is either no treatment of climate change at all, or potentially even the misinformation around climate change and the perpetuation of climate denialism, to then thinking about how we might be able to get more, sensitive education, responsive education, and more transformative education in the context of education about climate change, education for climate action, education for climate empowerment, and finally, education for climate justice. So again, I apologize. These are scene setting. Just wanted to get ourselves kind of oriented to the conversation that's going to happen today with our panel. So I will turn things back over to Zani and invite the panelists up to the stage. Is that right? Oh, we have a video. Okay. So, okay. Everybody stay in your seats.
The government of Solomon Islands aims to improve the senior secondary education and prepare students to shift to a more climate-resilient economy. With support from the Asian Development Bank, the Asian Development Fund, and the Island Trust Fund, the Senior Secondary Education Improvement Project will improve the quality of learning, increase students' access to school, and strengthen management of schools.
We would like the new curriculum to be based on the 6 capabilities, and they are character, citizenship, collaboration, creativity and entrepreneurship, critical thinking, and communication. We want that to be in the curriculum to build a peaceful and a unified society, and also to prepare young people for the 21st century. We would like to train teachers who can deliver this new kind of curriculum, and also to promote learning which enable students to become critical thinkers who are able to make informed decisions and also find solutions and able to cope with the changes that are happening.
We need to rethink the future and prepare for climate shocks and climate change. So we need to modernize our curriculum, particularly to focus on those challenges that we face with climate change and sea level rise.
Our subjects will become more practical and help people, the young people, to adapt to real ways, and also to prepare for the changes and new careers, especially for the future, like electrician, mechanics, for solar and hydro power. So with the curriculum, we'll weave in climate change and 21st century skills into the subjects in the senior secondary.
We intend to construct classrooms in addition to what we already have, particularly in national secondary schools as well as provincial secondary schools.
You should come talk about him now, introduce him now the teaching about climate change and how na him work, how na you should help him each other for deal with them now the effect of climate change.
Our curriculum should involve the climate change, especially to students. So if we can start from the bottom up, like in schools, and teach them about climate change, they know what they're going to face in the future and how they're going to deal with those problems. I mean, it's no lie that climate change is happening now.
We need to prepare for the future and put climate change front and center of the senior secondary education improvements.
My favorite quote is, it's no lie that climate change is happening now. And in that context, it's really critical for young people to be able to understand not only what is happening, but also how to respond in the future to climate change. So that's what we want to discuss over the next, I guess we have about 40 minutes in this session for our discussion. So thank you, Christina, very much for the scene setter. And can I invite our panelists to come up so that we can, and I'll introduce you as you're coming up, I guess. So, so we have Cindy Bryson, who is our social development specialist in the Human and Social Development Sectors Group here at ADB. She's an anthropologist and supports Pacific Island governments with ADB finance projects in education, social protection, gender, and youth development. And she has extensive experience in working in social and community development, having worked with non-governmental organizations, consulting firms, and with governments, particularly working with vulnerable groups. So welcome, Cindy. We also have Koldreen Kolai, who's the Deputy Secretary Corporate Services at the Ministry of Education and Human Resource. And he's an important partner for ADB in this project that you have now seen the video of. Mr. Kolai has over 13 years of working in the Solomon Islands government as a human resource officer in various government ministries, including the Ministry of Health, Medical Services, and Public Service. And he has coordinated coordinated and implemented DFAT-supported project in the public sector. He has worked as Deputy Director in Digital Transformation in the Ministry of Communication, where he coordinated the first national e-commerce strategy for Solomon Islands. Currently, he's appointed as the Deputy Secretary, Corporate Services in the Ministry of Education and Human Resource Development. And he is the implementing partner of the Solomon Islands Senior Secondary Improvement Project that we will be hearing about this morning. And then we have Sana Kazmi, who's the head of partnership and lead at the Sindh Policy Unit in STEAM Pakistan. She currently works on mobilizing diverse stakeholders for STEAM outreach to government schools in Pakistan, as well as providing technical assistance on STEAM to the School Education and Literacy Department in the Sindh province of Pakistan. She has worked for over 10 years on government school reform, establishing school enrichment programs in the arts, environmental activism, and robotics, and advocating for policy reform in school governance and child protection. She worked as a technology consultant previously and has a degree in computer science from MIT. And in the program, you had seen that there was another person, Huma, from the same organization. Unfortunately, she couldn't be here, but we're very grateful for Sana to coming to represent her organization. And finally, we have Christina that we have previously introduced. So thank you. By way of reminder, please, you can submit your questions via the conference site, so electronically. And your question, as you may have already seen from participating in sessions yesterday, your question can be voted up. And so we will be moving the questions according to sort of how popular they are. So maybe you can encourage your friends to vote for your question. Working? Is it working? Okay, so we will start with you, Cindy, with a question. I mean, since we've just watched the video and it's fresh in our minds, so we wanted to hear from you. How did the Solomon Islands Senior Secondary Education Improvement Project came to be? And maybe you can tell us about the issues that you're seeking to address through this project.
Thanks, Sonny. Thanks, everyone. I guess I want to say that it didn't start as a climate change and gender transformative project. And maybe if we had have come to this skills forum, maybe it would have. With ADB financed investments, generally there's a discussion with ADB and the Solomon Islands government. And that's generally with the Ministry of Finance. So we were lucky that the Ministry of Finance said, okay, let's do an education project. So that's when the ADB project team has a discussion with the Ministry of Education and Human Resource Development. So with Cauldron and his colleagues in senior management. At the time, ADB was supporting a university campus in the capital, the construction, and other development partners were focused on early childhood education, primary and junior secondary, but no one was focused on senior secondary. So when we asked the Ministry of Education what area they wanted the project to focus on, they were quick to say, yep, senior secondary, that's where we need the support. And they were thinking, we need infrastructure, and we need some support to improve teaching and learning. Kind of in very early on in this kind of concept phase, COP26 was happening, and it was the time when COPs were like really impactful in kind of they were in the media, and it was a really big deal. And I think at the same time, the Solomon Islands government was determined to be the second most in the world in terms of disaster risk. So it was an easy discussion with the Ministry of Education to say, let's make climate change the centre of the project and use education as a way to build human capital to help the country achieve a climate resilient economy. And the video was made not long after those discussions. So we had really early buy-in in terms of developing the project to build climate resilience and to have a strong disaster risk reduction focus. The gender transformation activities of the project took a while, right? So we kind of looked at the statistics from the very beginning, and there was a very small difference between the numbers of girls graduating to the numbers of boys graduating. And so we thought we'll do gender mainstreaming, right? But it wasn't until the team really sort of started to do the deep dive into the statistics and started to hear the stories of the girls that we realized that actually they're facing many more challenges in order to complete senior secondary, but also to continue with learning and continue with employment afterwards. And so that we were very fortunate at the same time that some grant money came up. And so then we were really able to build in some gender transformative components. Thanks.
If I can just follow up. And then one of the components was really developing the second chance kind of program component, learning policy to support pregnant girls and young mothers to remain in school. So can you talk a little bit about why, in this type of project, this component was important for the project?
Yeah. So there's really high rates of teenage pregnancies and young marriage. And in the country, it's expected that if you do get pregnant, you drop out, and there's not really a chance to return, especially to senior secondary. So it was already in the gender policy of the Education Ministry. So we wanted to pick it up, but rather than just adding, let's develop a policy on second chance learning for the project, we decided to include a pilot, right? So we'll work very intensively with a few schools to figure out what works and what doesn't work and what additional support and might be needed, like wraparound services. Maybe they might need catch-up classes or flexible learning approaches. So it tests out, an NGO will develop it. And then after the pilot, we'll then be in an informed position to prepare the policy, put it in place, an implementation plan, and as well as a monitoring and evaluation framework that collects data on the numbers that are actually dropping out because of pregnancy and family commitments. So that's something to be excited about. I don't know, Zoni, do you want me to run through some of the other gender transformative components of the project if I have time? Okay, there's lots, so bear with me. I guess one is that with the Irish Trust Fund funding, we were able to include a green labour market assessment for the Solomon Islands. So we'll also be doing professional development for teachers in every senior secondary school to become career counsellors. So with the labour market assessment and the training with the career counsellors, they'll be able to go back into the schools and really be very specific about what are the green jobs that are available, and particularly promoting female students into those green jobs. And also focusing more on STEM, encouraging more female students to go into STEM subjects. That's one thing. We'll also be developing a whole new subject called Living Sustainably. And in that subject, there'll be lots of disaster risk reduction, bringing in community professors to talk about local practices to adapt and focus and recover after disasters. But it will also include a syllabus on healthy living. And that was where we'll do the family planning and the sexual and reproductive health component. That is not currently being taught in the schools, or only very minimally. So we'll be running a pilot again to test the content, to test the delivery approaches before rolling it out nationally. There's lots more. Lots of curriculum. Obviously, we're going to do a whole curriculum review and make sure that it promotes gender equal education, professional development for school leaders, as well as all of the teachers nationally. There'll be a specific leadership program for aspiring female educators. We'll be updating the policy. And of course, we'll be building new infrastructure in 10 schools across the country that will have very innovative, low-cost approaches to classroom designs, dormitories, and sanitation facilities, particularly trying to kind of figure out how to improve menstrual health hygiene. I think that's, I'll stop there. There's more.
Yeah, no, I'm really happy that you brought out the whole infrastructure piece as well. So, and I think also in that infrastructure piece, you have some passive cooling also features to make sure that the schools will, be places where, the students can learn and be comfortable with the increasing sort of heat waves that are taking place. So it would be really great to hear from you, Kuldreen, as sort of the partner in this project. Why did the Solomon government choose to address climate disaster resilience through the secondary education in particular? And what were some of the things that you had to prepare things that you needed to do in order to ensure that the project is ready for implementation as sort of you're moving forward with this?
Thank you. Thank you so much. And first of all, I would like to say thank you, ADB, for sponsoring me and also to come to appear before you this morning. First of all, thank you so much for that question. It's very important. As you can see in the front here, we are talking about gender and it's gender inequality here, more women than men. But anyway, thank you so much. But as you can see in the video, what we are going to present, what's been asked today is sort of like reinforce what we have been here for the past 2 days up to now. And that's what is now happening. And as you are aware from the video and also the speakers, Solomon Islands is a country of surrounded by vast Pacific, vast ocean, and it's prone to natural disaster of earthquake, cyclones, and the sea level rise. And one of the important things that we come up into this is just because of the knowledge. It's important for us to go into having been in the ocean and you've been swimming alone. It's important to have the knowledge and equip with young people to have a knowledge about the global warming, encourage them to change about the behaviors as well as help them to adapt to the climate changes. More importantly, we understand that education is a tool and it's the one that we could learn and help the teachers, as Cindy have already said, about professional development, not just only for infrastructure, but we are encompass a 3-component curriculum, infrastructure, as well as professional development for the teachers. So it's in a holistic way where we really like as much as possible to gain a modernized knowledge. And in terms of preparedness for Solomon Islands, especially the Ministry of Education is partnership with other department ministries, especially Ministry of Finance in the country, as well as not only them, but also other key stakeholders, the universities and teachers, as well as the recipients, the community down there. In that, the ministry itself, we're also preparing ourselves in terms of setting up the office, how this project will come into formulating our office, and that we set up what we call project management unit. And we already identify offices and working with the other divisions in our ministry, how we could collaborate and get this project implementation going. And yes, in that, we are really looking forward to it. And thank you for ADB for considering and helping us on education and especially on climate change adaptations and disaster resilience. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I'm now going to move to Sana because we would like to, hear a little bit more about sort of your work with STEAM Pakistan project. And I guess maybe also equally important is why is it that we need to focus on STEAM education for girls and in Pakistan and I guess everywhere. So over to you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Zoni. So STEAM Pakistan is a national program, first of its kind in Pakistan, which is, it's started by the Ministry of Federal Education, and it's sponsored by Malala Fund. It's not a huge project in terms of the financial contribution. So we're trying to run a STEAM program at scale with very little budget. Which makes it interesting because, sometimes you think STEAM and you think, oh, there'll be robotics kits and big events and whatnot. But we're trying to do it through very low cost, no cost initiatives through which we're transforming over the course of the next 5 years. The ambition is 13,000 high schools across the country in all the provinces and territories, which itself is challenging because, education is a devolved subject in Pakistan. So we work with the federal ministry at the capital, but then with the provincial education departments in all the provinces and territories. So the program has a very well curated 10-level journey that all the partner schools go through. This involves, one of the main features is STEAM clubs, which students join, students from those grades. And then there's grades 6 to 8 are the main participants. And I think we heard yesterday about how giving students more agency and, in climate is going to be the key. And this is not a climate focused project, but I think STEAM itself lends to climate action because it's STEAM and not STEM. So the activities that are a part of this project are all designed to be, one, aligned to the curriculum, because Pakistan is, one of the most vulnerable countries to climate change. So we cannot wait for a climate change curriculum. We are working on that, but we need to start yesterday. As we saw with the super floods last year and the urban rain, the province that I work in Sindh, 20,000 schools were destroyed either completely or partially. So we don't have the time to wait for, the curriculum to be updated and teachers to be trained. We're also doing that. But, this program is curriculum aligned, and it has STEAM club activities, which government school teachers can implement within their classroom so that they're supporting the learning objectives that they're already trying to achieve. And all the activities are designed in a way that, they inspire curiosity in children, that they, get them to develop critical thinking skills, to solve problems from a multidisciplinary lens, which is the need of the hour, the need of the future, but also that's the approach that's going to solve the climate problems. So in addition to that, we have teacher hubs, or teacher betaks, as we call them in Urdu, where teachers get together and, they form a peer learning network through which they solve their own pedagogical issues related to STEAM subjects. In addition to this, we also have a lot of interaction events where students get to travel outside the school, to the nearest university, to a park, to a production facility, to anything that we can connect to science and math and design. Because what we and why is STEAM important? As you asked, why is this important for both boys and girls? The future of this country, but also of our planet, depends on preparing children to solve our very complex problems through a multidisciplinary approach, which is what STEAM provides. So that's why. And then specifically for girls are underrepresented in STEM fields, but also overall in the workforce, Pakistan has one of the lowest, workforce participation rates by women. There's only, I think, less than 20% representation. And then even in STEAM fields in education, in higher education, they're underrepresented. We have the highest digital gender gap. So women are 49% less likely to be using mobile internet, despite the growth of mobile internet in Pakistan. It's the most used. So that's why we need to focus on women.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think that you've made a very good case for why we do need to invest in STEAM education for girls and for young people overall. Now, I want to just ask one question before we turn to questions from the audience to Christina. From the presentation we saw from your study that countries are not paying enough attention to climate change education as a climate strategy. So it would be great to hear from you how an institution like ADB can champion climate change education and support our DMCs to consider gender transformative climate change education as an effective tool in building the resilience of communities and citizens.
Thank you for the question. Thank you. Thanks for the question. So first and foremost, I think what the ADB could be doing is to ensure that countries are including climate change education and a gender transformative climate change education in their nationally determined contributions, their national action plans, their education sector plans, in policy. Put it in policy, because once we have it in policy, then we can have an accountability mechanism to ensure that it happens in practice. But where I also implore the ADB and other stakeholders who are in the room today, is to really, really question yourself and whether the approach that you are using is gender transformative, or one of the sort of, if you recall that slide that I showed earlier, one of the ticks below it. Because I think what we also risk today is the notion that we need to do some quick action. We need something that will show us impact quickly, that we're getting girls involved in STEM or in STEAM, or we're getting girls involved in the green economy or something. We want to do something quick and show that we've done something. But the risk to that is that we risk a gender sensitive approach or a gender responsive approach that doesn't really target the underlying drivers of vulnerability and exclusion. And so if we really want to ensure that we're approaching our gender inclusive programming in a gender transformative way, we really need to ensure and ask ourselves, use that slide to help you measure where are you in your programming when it comes to actually gender transformative education. I'll give you a quick example just to put it more concretely. So if you have a program in a technical vocational education program, and you don't have girls and women in your program, and you really want to get them in there, and you advertise, you try to find some girls and you try to get them into your program. It's a gender sensitive approach. You understand that there are some exclusion factors and you want to get girls and women into your program. You might put some flyers and spaces that girls and women frequent. You might try to go through channels, WhatsApp groups or whatnot that girls and women are at to try to get them in, right? It's a gender sensitive approach. If we want to go a little step further, we might want to think about what are the structural barriers that are preventing girls and women from coming to your technical program. Maybe they don't have the opportunity to engage in the prerequisite education in the first place to even feel comfortable to be enrolling in your program. And so maybe you might need to create some sort of remedial program, something to help address some of those structural barriers. But the challenge with that gender responsive approach is that oftentimes we're only focused on trying to overcome individual barriers to empowerment. And we're not thinking about how do we get at the systemic issues? What are the social norms, the gender norms that are preventing girls from even thinking about joining your technical program? What are perhaps even the stereotypes that instructors in your program might be carrying and perpetuating in the learning environment, and therefore making girls really not want to stick around for very long. So I think using a scale like the one I was showing you above earlier can really help to ensure that, one, yes, you're addressing gender inclusion, but you're doing it in a gender transformative way, and that you're addressing the underlying structural systemic barriers that have created that vulnerability in the first place, and can really help you, address some of the more gender justice elements of your goals. So thanks.
Sana, it looks like you have a point that you'd like to make in response to what Christina has discussed.
I just wanted to add, I mean, I completely agree. I think, you know, in our project, when we started in the beginning, I think we were gender responsive, and we've evolved to start thinking about how we can really be gender transformative. So there's one aspect of our program called the STEAM Safir sessions, or Safir means ambassador in Urdu. So the idea is because women and girls don't pursue these fields, and it's for many reasons. Many of them are cultural, social, safety issues. So one thing that we've done is we try to bring role models into classrooms from those fields. And we've really been careful to take more women into both boys' schools and girls' schools, because it's just as important for the boys to see women in leadership roles, women leading the way with STEM, women, you know, doing innovative, cool things in science and technology and in architecture. So I think that's been one of the very transformative aspects of our program. And then, you know, when we have, in some cases, we're still responding because it's year one. But so, for example, the very first award that we gave to a school, they were getting to travel to go to a science festival. And then we realized that because of a security concern at the last minute, there were protests, the girls couldn't go. So then we've changed our programming so that whenever there's any opportunity, we make sure that we find a way for the girls to participate. And, you know, even if it's at the cost of the boys going. So, and I think one thing that we can learn from that is you will have to invest more. It's harder. It takes more money, more time. You have to invest more in making it possible for girls to travel to an event. And, you know, it cannot be equal, but that's because things are not equal to begin with.
Yes, I think that's a very good point. And so we have actually a question from the audience on what have been the indicators of success of gender transformative education projects. So would you like to start, Cindy?
Okay, thank you. I'll give it a go, but I actually think Zon is probably more qualified to answer this question than me or Christina. I guess I would say that, first of all, ADB is quite unique in that we have a design and monitoring framework for each of our projects that we do outline indicators. And for gender-related indicators, we are one of the only to actually measure the effectiveness at evaluation. And so we do have requirements for gender transformative projects, or gender, we call it gender equity projects, thank you, gen projects, that they need to have both outcome level indicators that we measure, as well as the specific outputs. And so the outcome level is a really important indicator, because it really focuses on all of the outputs and what will be the overall outcome. I guess in terms of success, what we would like to see, I think, in the Solomon Islands project, although we will begin next year, is that we do want to see some of that structural and systemic activities, the interventions to be put in place at the output level. So we will want to see a certain number of gender responsive infrastructure built at the 10 project schools, and innovative new approaches. We would want to track the number of young girls that have returned to school, And then and overall, we would also want to make sure that we've put in place those second chance learning policies. But as I said, I think you've got all of the experience across many, many different education projects. So I'm sure that you've got other examples of measuring success. Thanks.
Thank you. Christina, did you want to?
I do maybe have just something to add to that, because I think as we're trying to talk about gender transformative education for climate resilience, it'll also be really important to begin intersecting our indicators of success on the gender transformative side and our indicators of success on the climate action side. And so how do we begin to look at that, and where are the areas of indication that tell us, that the opportunities to make choices, to make decisions around climate action are being achieved? Because oftentimes the vulnerability that women and girls face, and in some cases also men and boys face, are in the response, the ability to even identify an opportunity or a solution when it comes to reducing their climate vulnerability, and to act in ways that either help to reduce that risk of harm, or that action on the actual, reduction of carbon emissions, or the promotion of environmental sustainability and biodiversity, or in an adaptation sort of action. So I think as we begin as a whole sector to begin thinking about how do we intersect gender transformation and climate action, that looking at what does gender transformative change allow in the context of climate resilience. So I think that's going to be important. No answers, but an area to go.
Yes. So we have a few questions here, and we have one that has gotten quite a bit of votes, but I'm not quite sure if I'm understanding this correctly. So the question is really around how climate changes in gender education, cross-sectional, with technology advancement between male and female. So I'm not quite sure what sort of how we could look at this. Maybe it's around, it says we observe the sitting power and grabbing the opportunities and education more in female compared to male. So maybe I can ask the person, Kesavan Ulaganathan, maybe if you're in the room, maybe you could expand a little bit. Yes, please go ahead.
What I want to say is that when you talk about climate changes to the gender, okay, we see the females, the girls, now they are more in universities, they are more in the developed countries, for example, compared to the males. So maybe this is due to the technology advancement, because it is lacking the interest of the studies, gathering the opportunities among the males. We have observed this compared to the intake, the successful rate, or even in a company we take any private or public sectors, more ladies, more women are there, women's power coming in compared to the male. So just wanted to get your, this is a bit running out of the topics, but even though I want to know your perception, how we can balance it, because technology advancement, esports and all these kind of gadgets makes people not interested compared to the women, females. They have the sitting power. What I mean by sitting power, they can spend time grabbing the opportunities in education to perish their future compared to the males. That is my point. Thank you.
Okay, I think we understand the question. So who would like to start, Coldreen, or maybe we could just go. Okay.
Thank you. That's a really hard question anyway. But in practical, I would just like to say in terms of our climate change and also the practice that we have, and especially for this project, we are looking into access. On the infrastructure project, we're looking into the building of dormitories as well as ablution blocks where can be able for more girls to have access on space where they could go into have access to education. But the important thing is in terms of for equalities and power, I can see here not just women having more power than men, but it's more into having equal access to education. because culturally we have a culture of girls to stay at home. But though girls have the opportunity of moving forward, but because of lacking of space, classrooms, and even dormitories, they are limiting the access to education. And with this, having this into perspective of climate change, the more access to sanitations and ablution block would be enabled then for the girls, like as Christina was saying about the privacy and all these things where girls can able to move into and have more access. But yeah, in terms of going to how gender plays in this role is something that we need more experts to explore further into this. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that response. We are almost out of time, but I just wanted to give all our panelists a chance to leave us with one message coming out of this discussion and something for us to consider in the future. So maybe just one sentence about sort of what you think we should be looking at in terms of gender transformative education for climate change. So we can start with you. Yes.
Okay, sure. Okay, a key takeaway is to remember that gender equality and gender transformative education, it's not a zero-sum game. It's not an effort to have a winner or a loser. It's about achieving equal relations of power in places where those relations of power are tipped in favor of one or the other, or it's not a binary, but are tipped in favor of one side to another side or something. But it's not a zero-sum game, and we need to remember that.
I just want to add, I don't think I mentioned this earlier, but I think partnerships are the key to kickstart this work, because like we discussed, curriculum change takes a while. Training teachers takes a while, transforming the society takes a while. So we need to, get everyone on board. So whether it's connecting universities to schools, whether it's innovative tech companies or just the regular corporate sector, much of which now has to report on SDGs. And it is in their interest to, for example, promote women in STEM. So how can we make use of that to help our schools? That's something that we should focus on.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, I think for me, we are here is not just to come and tick the boxes. There's climate change and the agenda is really affecting our peoples. I think my message for me or takeaway today is more on collaboration, partnership, and understanding the local context. So these issues are happening here, happening in the global context. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would just say that don't just rely on the statistics, and you've got to really dig deeper. When we looked at the completion of senior secondary rates in the Solomon Islands, they're really alarming, right? So you have 14% of boys that are that started primary school end up completing senior secondary, and we had 12% of girls. So in terms of percentage points, it's not very great. But when we dug really deep and we had the conversations was when we realized that the 12%, it was a real struggle for them to get through. And they were confronting so many structural and systemic and social norms to even get to completing. So please dig deeper and consult and bring in specialists, and don't be afraid to change your project halfway through, right? Bring in the climate change, bring in gender transformation. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I think we unfortunately have run out of time, but I want to thank Coldreen, Cindy, Sana, and Christina for having spent, the last hour sort of sharing with us about their projects, about their work, and sort of their perspectives on this really critical aspect of education for the future. I also want to thank you for your participation. We had a full room. So this is great to see this kind of interest and commitment to exploring this issue and the intersections between gender and climate change education. So it's really great to see all of you here. And last but not least, I want to thank my colleague Marla, who has been my partner in organizing this. And I really want to thank her for all the hard work that she's put into organizing this session. So Marla's at the back. Please wave so we can thank you. All right. Thanks, everyone, and have a great rest of the day.